This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
A little self-care can go a long way, especially amidst the hustle and bustle of the holidays. That's where Vegamore comes in. Trusted by millions, Vegamore is all about giving your hair the love and care it deserves. With their vegan and cruelty-free formulas, you can nourish and revitalize your strands while indulging in some much-needed pampering. Because let's face it, who couldn't use a bit more me time this time of year? Go to vegamore.com/ACAST, code ACAST. That's vegamor.com/ACAST, code ACAST.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per detail.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hi everyone, my name's John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and today I'm going to be talking to Tom Shone. Tom was the first guest ever on the Writers on Film podcast, so I'm really happy to have him back. He is the author of many books, most recently the Nolan variations about Christopher Nolan. He's written books on Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino, a whole bunch. And today we're going to do something special because we're not talking to him primarily to sort of talk about one of his books, but because he also wrote a brilliant book called Blockbusters, I thought it would be interesting if we had a conversation about the state of blockbusters today in the age of COVID and following the pandemic, and because we have some blockbusters which we can talk about, such as No Time to Die, Dune, The Last Duel, and I think we maybe talk about some other things, but those three films in particular are what we're going to talk about. So there will be some spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen those films, you might want to skip one or two of those parts. One other thing I have to say is that Tom's based in New York, and the ambiance of New York can sometimes be heard in the background. I hope it doesn't impair your enjoyment at all. I don't think it does. I actually quite like hearing sounds coming from another part of the world. I mean, the sounds you might hear on my side will be church bells and the sleepy village, but with Tom, it's classic New York-arama. Okay, so if you like the podcast, please remember to like it on Facebook and spread the word generally. You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Jonty, DRJONTY. But before you do any of that, please enjoy the conversation. We're entering a very strange landscape for blockbusters because even today I was reading an article by Brandon Katz all about how the whole business, the whole genre of blockbusters is going to change simply because they've lost so much money. And he was even this year, it's like 67% down on 2019. So I mean, that's almost 70% less money in the pot. How do you think it's going to go?
Well, I mean, it's hard to see the Hollywood giving up on them in the sense that they really have been the backbone of the business for so long now. I see them as they're in the middle of the boat. They seem fairly safe to me, which isn't to say that there's not going to be some belt tightening or there's going to be preference for this type of film over another. But I can't quite see the blockbuster itself kind of, disappearing, certainly. But, I'm definitely well used to hearing that, they're about to bring the whole thing down to its knees and the death of cinema. And, that's been a kind of, they're frightening things. There's so much money and manpower and investment in them that, that shepherding them is a sort of scary business, and it always has been. And so I think, it would be strange if, COVID hadn't in some way alarmed the industry, even at that level. And I think we've seen that. I mean, I can remember thinking when Dune came out, feeling a little nervous for it, even though I hadn't actually seen it at that point. But it was getting good reviews, there was a bit of me that was that split release that they had for it seemed very the numbers could be quite soft. So I was relieved that it did well, well enough for them to come back for another one anyway. So yeah, it's definitely it's a scrotum tightening time.
Yeah, I mean, his argument isn't so much that they're going to disappear or they're going to that there's any risk of them going extinct, but more that you'll still have sort of blockbusters, you'll still have those big IP films at the center, because he refers to them as too big to fail. The industry just needs them. There's no way the industry can go on.
Okay.
But there might be more sort of tailored, smaller budget blockbusters, if such a thing exists, which are much more sort of targeted to go towards the streaming services and things like that, rather than theatrical distribution. And so it's almost like, I don't know, maybe I'm reading into it, but it almost felt like there might be a blockbuster which will be definitely a sort of theatrical experience, the Christopher Nolan, the bigger of the Marvel films, and then there might be sort of Marvel films or DC films which are actually budgeted because they're really only going to go to streaming. They're not going to be aimed at the theatrical so much. That's what I was sort of extrapolating. I might be.
Did he have any examples? I mean, what does that second type of movie look like exactly? Like the one that's been budgeted down, that's a sort of mid-budget. I mean, well, I'm just curious. It's interesting. Like, I've for so long associated, blockbusters as just inherently expensive creatures, and it's sort of tied into like the reason people like them. You go and see one of those kind of big disaster movies by Roland Emmerich or a Michael Bay movie, and you're literally going to some degree just to see money being spent. Like, that's the attraction. Like, there's something about those effects. That you don't feel satisfied unless you've seen money being spent. And I don't mean that's explicitly so, but literally so, in the sense that the production values that you kind of want and desire just are inherently expensive. So it's curious. I wonder what a mid-budgeted blockbuster would look like. I mean, I tell you, the Bourne movies actually were kind of like as close to being that kind of creature as you could get. I mean, they're the only ones I can think of really that were sort of bantamweights, sort of boxing with the heavyweights. They brought in $1 billion. They competed against Bond. They competed against, the bigger spectacles. But in fact, but for the actors and they're not particularly expensive. They weren't particularly expensive. So I can think of those films, but I wonder. I mean, and of course they're very earthbound in the sense that they're not superpowers. There's nobody with any, sort of earth-shattering. So there's that element of it. So is that the kind of film he meant? I mean, that would be. I could see those, but they're still very hard to come by.
I can't remember if he actually sort of gave any real examples. I mean, I was sort of thinking of maybe the sort of second tier sort of Marvel character You know, they aren't the huge. I don't know how Black Widow did, for instance. I'm not sure if that would be an example of something which you know had an enormous budget and all the rest of it, but maybe didn't have the broadest appeal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that you would always have to look at is you just have to find somebody who could do the effects for the thing that makes them all expensive is the digital work, you know, and I'm sure there are there are variations within it, but basically once you start using them, then you know you've got an expensive movie. And I can't Black Widow. I mean, unless they decide to do Black Widow as a kind of more of a spy, you know, thriller, because she is a spy. Like, you know, I could see that working. In fact, it would have been a lot better if they'd done that. They were kind of aping Bourne in, you know, many other ways, but then of course they had to have their kind of big set pieces that cost a lot of money. But if you could have done without those and just made a Bourne picture out of Black Widow, then yeah, I could definitely, I could see that could work.
I wondered why. I remember seeing this in X-Men 2, where X-Men 2 felt quite bloated, and it felt to me like there were set pieces that because they'd paid for them, there was absolutely no way they were gonna take them out of the movie, because it was like, how do you cut this set piece, which, as you say, with the digital effects and everything, is eating up a heck of a lot of your budget. And I just sort of wonder about something like Black Widow, where, you know, who's going to see a Black Widow movie going if they don't have a scene where a huge sky palace falls to Earth? I'm going to be disappointed. You know, I'm not. Is that really, you know, what audiences are going for?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's sort of wishful thinking in the sense that what that would then require is a lot more work done on their scripts, because Marvel just sort of are very, I think, you know, lackadaisical with the script. They just, because they know that's not really what's making them their money. So they cook up these things in a year and then that's it. But so they would have to go back to the business of sort of making movies, essentially, like kind of, and that's the difficult one. That's the, you know, that's the one where you have to put in the years of work, developing scripts and sort of working on them with producers. And it's sort of, that's in a way like, but they've got this easy shortcut, which is that they just make it expensive and make the, you know, weirdly, it's become less risky for them to make expensive movies than it is for them to make cheap movies. Like they're in this sort of weird logic, and it makes sense that it's actually safer for them to spend a lot of money, which is weird. But they've been in that trap for like decades, and I can't really see a way out of it. I mean, it's a bit like asking somebody to sort of grow younger. You know, like the industry has sort of got to a certain level. You can't then just sort of reverse time and ask it to sort of rejuvenate and go back, much as kind of critics often say, oh, I wish they just made movies again, or I wish they wrote better scripts, or, you know, it's always going to kind of press on. So, I mean, I hope that guy is right. I hope that argument bears out. I mean, certainly, you know, as bored as anyone by kind of most of the Marvel movies that come out. I mean, they just seem desperate for some kind of innovation, and less money seems like a great way to go. Like that's how you really get the discipline. That's how you get the Nolans. That's how they've all come out of the low budget world. Like Cameron, Nolan, Jackson, all those guys came out of an incredibly disciplined, low budget filmmaking world. And, you know, and to this day, really, I think that you can't really fault a Cameron movie. Like he's you really see, if he spends a lot of money, you see it. It doesn't seem there's much been wasted. I mean, that's the feeling, that rather sinking feeling that you get of just sort of like, of just from a lot of the Marvel movies, of just sort of delight piling on delight in terms of the way they look. And it's sort of cloying. But I never get that sense. There's a sort of, no matter how expensive they are, you know, Cameron movies or Nolan movies, they never sort of feel wasteful. You know, they don't feel like there's too much fat on them. They don't feel bloated. That sort of terrible sense of like kind of engorgement that you get from those sort of, you know, superhero films. They're actually quite lean things, you know, so there's an art to them. But yeah, it's the ability to spend money well and in a disciplined way is hard, obviously, to come by.
What do you think of the sort of the recent sort of blockbusters that we've had, the sort of the return to the cinema, the return to the theatrical experience? It seems that we've had like something that critics have been sort of, ought to be celebrating. We have real auteurs turning up to direct blockbusters. You've got Denis Villeneuve with Dune. You've got Carrie.
Doing Bond.
Yeah, Dune Bond, and you've got Chloe Zhao doing The Eternals, which I haven't had an opportunity to see yet, but I have seen the first two. What do you think of that? As that feels like something different.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, both the Bond and the Dune felt, in that regard, quite similar. I mean, you've really kind of got very high-end kind of filmmakers at work for franchises in ways that don't feel like a kind of a diminution of their talents or like a waste of their time, or that they're kind of either slumming it or they're above the task or beneath the task. Like, it really just seems to employ their talents. I haven't seen Eternals either. I'll sort of reserve any thoughts on that, but yeah, they're very I mean, the Bond film, I thought, like a lot of people, I just, it was just particularly the first 50 minutes of it, I thought were just ecstatically good. I mean,
right.
I mean, it definitely, like, there was I think I had some criticisms of the sort of middle. I mean, what did you think? I mean, how did it go in Italy?
Well, for me, I really, really liked it. I'm hugely invested in Bond. I mean, I've read the books numerous times and I've seen all the movies. So I've got and I actually did a sort of COVID rewatch, however long ago it was when COVID started, 1.5 years ago. And I found it was interesting rewatching them back to back and just going, oh my God, they get really rotten quite soon. It's pretty much, and all of the Roger Moores, which of course was my James Bond when I was a kid. Oh, they're not even films anymore. They're just like parody with action sequences, which are then ruined by soundtrack jokes and a guy looking at a bottle and looking askance at Roger Moore and a gondola.
A tramp who,
it's just
when he comes out of the sea,
so I really rate Daniel Craig. I think he did something, and I know people say, "Oh, Timothy Dalton tried and Pierce Brosnan tried," but they always tried within the constraints of a still recognizably Roger Moore-ish Bond setup, and Daniel Craig just totally, I mean, and obviously the production team and everything totally ripped that up, and I really rated No Time to Die. I thought, I agree with you. I think the middle's flabby, and I'm kind of surprised that they were sitting on this movie for 1.5 years after it was completed and locked and everything, and nobody thought, you know what, can we trim a little bit out of the middle? Can we just make it, I couldn't work out what the baddie was actually doing. And boats were supposed to be coming to the island, and we didn't get a shot of the boats coming to the island, so we didn't have a sense of like an imminent approach or an imminent danger. So there were a few things like that you can be picky about. Why is he wearing a mask if he's going to shoot everybody in the house? What's the mask for? So you can be, but I thought that I could agree with you, that first ecstatic sort of hour, and then the last hour. There's still another hour. Still another hour.
The third hour.
I just thought the audacity of killing Bond was kind of, I wasn't surprised, but I was amazingly shocked, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was very good. I mean, it's interesting that, like, when you look at the Daniel Craig Bonds, and you look at the ones that were really good, which is to say, Casino Royale and this one, it really becomes very clear that the great harbinger of the future for Bond was not Connery or Moore, it was George Lazenby, because the model for both Casino Royale and this film is On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is to say Bond in love. And it's like that turned out to be the thing that's what all along, all it needed to do was to get rid of the casual sex and the sexism and the jokes and the girls, and Bond needed to be invested in someone else. And the moment that happens, the film just unfolds and you've got something that people want to watch. And like, so I can remember, so I felt like, oh, okay, George Lazenby turned out to be the guy that told Bond what his future would be, which I think is kind of interesting. It was just that one film. But of all the Bonds, I feel like that one is sort of, people often, and Nolan goes back to that one as well, doesn't he, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and says what a great Bond film that was. So, so definitely, and Craig, I think, is, as you say, I mean, he's a serious, he gave that character kind of soul and regrets and an emotional life, and that is, and some kind of ambivalence. I always feel like the guys that play the best Bonds are the ones that almost hate him the most. Like Connery didn't particularly, was very resentful of the role of Bond by the end, and cursed having to kind of come back and do me, and Craig reportedly has similar kind of, ambivalence about Bond, and sort of, oh God, I'd rather slit my neck, I think, the wrists than do another one, he said at one point. But the ones that actually dislike him the most are actually the ones that are best at playing him, so, that's why Craig and Connery are just in their own class, I think. But
Pierce Brosnan always looked too pleased to be playing him. It's like, oh, this is my dream role. I'm not a great actor, and I haven't got much range. So this is me. This is down to I can't do this.
He'd wanted it for so long, and then he got it, and then there was a certain amount of kind of confusion. Like, what do I do now, kind of thing. But yeah, there was. I think he never seemed in command, really, to me. There was the problem. I think that he's got a very soft manner, and he's a very gentle sort of guy. I mean, I never kind of got that sort of stentorian bark that kind of like Bond can sometimes do, give, where they're just sort of like, you know what I mean? There was that going on for Brosnan. Like, there was something a little too soft about him, and that couldn't be said of Craig. I mean, Craig just zeroed in very rightly on the physicality of Bond. I mean, it was two things. It was kind of like his emotional life. It was his soul. It was kind of like what effect are these killings having on him? But at the same time, immense kind of physicality and like kind of the kind of glory that that film makes of his body in Casino Royale. I mean, he's the Bond girl, like it's kind of like his physicality is kind of the thing that we're lingering on in that film.
He comes out of the sea like Ursula Andress and Halle Berry, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and although the Mendes films put him in a suit, he never seemed that uncomfortable to me in a suit, and I always liked him best in those Hawaiian shirts. I definitely kind of felt that Craig was sort of in some level in conflict or he was rebelling against some of the strictures of kind of what Bond must be and do, the quips, the suits, the girls. You felt like this guy was a sort of modern enough male to find a lot of that stuff embarrassing, and he did some of it under duress, but he did his absolute best to kind of get as much of the sexism out of the series as possible. I mean, I think that's kind of maybe one of his lasting achievements. Far from being some high and mighty, sort of act of kind of preaching to the masses, it actually was exactly what had needed to happen with Bond. Like, it was thrilling to see him in love. It was thrilling to see him sort of attached to someone. So, I think his instincts were great. I would be so interested to know, like, kind of what kind of input he had on it. I would suspect quite a lot, in the sense that there's something about those movies, and particularly the last one, No Time to Die, which seemed like it could only have come about if the director, the producer, and the star were all on the same page.
Right.
In other words, everybody's making this film with a single will, and they've all got the same idea in mind, and they all agree. Like, it's so rare on those films to get that. So there's a kind of quality of leadership around it that I'm keen to know. It's obviously the Broccolis, it's obviously Fukunaga, but it's also Craig. I believe that when we read about it, when we find out how those films were made, I think he will emerge as a kind of as an author. Feels that way. It feels like it feels like there's that great alignment of kind of role and script and an actor that comes about when essentially an actor is leading, and people are listening to him.
I think one thing that really proves your point, one thing that's really I remember being really struck by when I first saw it, and I saw it a couple of times because I saw it in Italian first because it was out, and then they showed it on Monday in English, so I went to see it again. When that moment before the song comes in, the sort of needle drop of the big song, is a really important moment in Bond films, because that's a moment where the camera sort of stays on something, and it might be somebody dying, or it might be somebody falling, or it might be, and it then merges into the title sequence. And in this film, it's him leaving his girlfriend at a railway station, and the shunting of the sort of carriages going by, and so it's an emotional moment. It's not him giving a quip as he offs somebody or anything like that. And
exactly right.
It just goes to the core of it,
And it's such a great bit of. I was trying to think if I'd seen that done before, where the person on the inside on the train walks back through the carriages in order to keep their eyes on the person they're leaving. I would like to think that was, I hadn't seen that. That was a nice bit of business to come up with, to establish that the feeling between them. It was touching. It was like an original bit of staging, but I mean, the whole pre-credit sequence is very different from any of the other Bonds, because it doesn't, it's her, not him. And he's got Fukunaga has got like his own. The one thing I liked about what he brought to it, apart from these. I mean, obviously the guy can shoot just beautifully, and he really is on point with all the things that are needed for this kind of movie. But he brought a genuine sense of nastiness to some of the villains. Like I really felt that they were just really up to no, really kind of. There was something genuinely creepy about them. There was something very. It's partly his thing with masks. He likes masks, doesn't he? I remember that. But the sense of sort of dire goings on, I don't know. It just felt sticky with sort of something genuinely nasty, and I missed that. I kind of, obviously the villains of Bond movies have become such a kind of archetype unto themselves, slightly laughable. Everybody knows they kind of talk about their plans at length. It's like the whole thing is self-parodying. But I feel that there was a sort of genuine nastiness to the film, which I appreciated and liked. And Spectre seemed, in the first 50 minutes, and one of the reasons I love that section so much is they just seemed like on you, like like a swarm of. I really felt like they were just this unstoppable force, and it's sort of very rare that you feel that in the first hour of a Bond movie. I mean, you generally kind of find out about the plot, and then you see them in the sort of at the end, and then you have perhaps a battle, and then they're overcome. But the idea that they're just on you, like immediately from the beginning of the film, a bit like the Joker actually in The Dark Knight, where it's just like a weather condition that kind of moves in like a storm, and it's just sort of, you can't escape it. I love that so much, and I love basically them taking that building and coming down the glass, and in they came, and it was just fantastic. That's exactly what you want Spectre to be like. And I was disappointed actually when they were wiped out for that reason. I was like, oh no, you've got such a great head of steam with those guys. Like, keep that up through the movie. Don't transfer power.
Yeah, I think the series has done that a little bit too much. No, it's Quantum. No, Quantum is actually a subsidiary of Spectre. No, it's not Spectre, it's this other thing. It's like, for crying out loud. Pick a story, pick a route.
The unified theory of the villains, they're all in the pocket of the others, and then that's true. They can't get a mastermind big enough or broad enough to kind of encompass the others, like Russian dolls or something. But I didn't. They should have just stuck with just this sort of this. They're just on the nape of your neck. Like that was. That's all I need to know. Like, they're just unstoppable. But yeah, and also the idea of like Bond essentially working for the CIA, freelancing. That was also so intriguing that I wish they had stayed with that longer. And I think M brings him back in again about the halfway mark, and I was immensely disappointed at that. I was like, no, God, I want the whole movie to be like Bond is kind of working for the CIA, and maybe he comes back in again at the end. That would be great. But like, don't like hand it in like like that was disappointing, because M was turning out to be a pretty good bad guy too. So it was like,
yeah,
I like the idea of him waging, in basically the battling with his own service, but then it's a bit like, nope, forget about that.
Yeah, they sort of spend that a bit cheaply. They set it up really well, the 007 and everything, and then when she sort of says, you can be 007, it felt like a child sort of plot point. Now, is it okay if I pass him the crown?
Yeah,
like,
it was sweet. It was kind, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, where was the rivalry?
Yeah, it just sort of dissipated. I thought, talking about that nastiness that you mentioned, for me, the best narrative nastiness was the gag that sort of kills him, basically, which is this: there's a poison that you're deadly to the people you love, which is just like you've made the subtext text right there.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's good. I mean, the idea of poison was great too. Like, that's something we hadn't really seen much of, I think, since. I think they get in From Russia with Love. They Elsa Krebs, didn't they? Had some poison there on the
stabby
her shoe.
Yeah, stabby kick.
Yeah.
Terrified me as a kid. I hated that so much.
Oh my God, it's so simple, right? Just somebody comes up to you and kicks you, and you're dead. But yeah, no, but it is a classic bit of kind of spycraft, and so yeah, it was nice to see them sort of expand upon that. That it was surprising that that nobody had done it before. It was all nuclear, wasn't it?
But it's literally. See, if that was Roger Moore, he would have said, toxic masculinity."
Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. That's funny. Yeah, no, he would have done. That's definitely where it was going. I mean, it was certainly. I think it's very gratifying to see kind of a lot of intelligent, talented people, hitting the bat with the ball, with some force, and it just sort of really working for audiences, and for all the sort of legitimate complaints there are about that the industry, franchises and blockbuster movies and whatnot, it definitely is important to kind of call out the ones that work, and that and when there is something driving it, they're deserved successes. And I felt that with that. It was a happy success.
Where do you think it will go post? I mean, nobody's going to be. I'll put a spoiler thing in the show notes to make sure nobody complains. But with him dying again, I mean that stunned me. It stunned me how much that stunned me. I just think it was so well done. It was like, it's friendly fire. He's called it in. It's self-sacrificing. It's genuinely heroic. And annihilating. There's no ambiguity. There's no maybe he's fallen in the Reichenbach Falls and he'll be back.
I mean, that definitely was. Was surprising to me too, that there was no ambiguity and that you actually had a shot of his, but essentially him vaporizing, and so that is interesting. I mean, the thing that nobody's done, but could still be done, is obviously young Bond. In other words, make it as a period movie. I mean, I've always wanted somebody to make Bond as like a period movie set in the 60s. So a bit like, Edgar Wright with Last Night in Soho, where you've just got like, all those, period details, which are just so lovely. And you've got the suits and the cars and the cinemas and the music and and Bond is, I mean, it would be interesting. I like as a sort of retro, essentially as a kind of retro movie. So they could do that. They could do Bond's first missions, and particularly if they're going to go for a younger guy, which it looks like they will, then that would make some kind of sense. But would you want to stay in that period that's the thing. It's a sort of slightly one-off thing, but it certainly explain how you get things started again. Maybe in subsequent movies it would just forget about the period detail, but you'd stick with the actor, and by that point nobody's really asking questions as to how this happened.
That was Tarantino's pitch, wasn't it? When he, how he often pitches stuff around. He wanted to do a version of Casino Royale, which would be really true to the book and which would be period.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. Of course, that's it. Yeah, he had that idea. Was that before they made Casino Royale?
Yeah. It was in the interim before Craig had.
That's interesting. Because in some ways, they took half of that pitch, but they left the other half. So yeah, that I mean, things have got so kind of, franchises are started and restarted and rebooted with such kind of offhandedness that they probably won't have to come up with much of an excuse or reason as to sort of why he's suddenly alive. Like these things, people are so used to the idea of kind of the multiverse, and nowadays that like simply starting Bond without any explanation would almost be possible. For better or worse, that's the world we're in. So, yeah, it shouldn't be too hard, but yeah, definitely.
That's what they've done in the past. I mean, except for Lazenby, this never happened to the other fella. I remember, was it Diamonds Are Forever? There was a sort of idea of plastic surgery at some point, and there's a remnant of that idea in Diamonds Are Forever, but it was actually in the script that the new Bond would be getting plastic surgery because his cover has been blown.
Oh, and a better wig, maybe.
Sean Connery, when he started in Dr. No, he had 5 wigs, and it was like one was for fighting, one was for underwater.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't look. I mean, it's good. Good wigs. I was just reading about the price tag for the wigs worn by Kristen Stewart in Spencer, and I think I've remembered this, that they were kind of $5,000 or something. Each wig was, I mean, a lot of money. I guess that's how much they cost when they're that good. But
the most surprising wig that I saw recently was the Mohican that Robert De Niro wears in Taxi Driver.
That was a wig.
That was a wig. I didn't know that was a wig. And that's why I was so surprised, because I just thought, well, it's De Niro, he's method, but apparently he was shooting something else, and it's a bald cap and a Mohican.
I did not know that. That is a surprise. That is a surprise. That's one of those things I don't want known. Can we not broadcast that?
Okay, I'll cut it out.
That's one of those secrets of the business sort of thing, where you actually think a little bit less of the people involved as a result. You're like, oh, god damn it. But I guess if you have to shoot another movie, that's okay.
It's just like De Niro. He's willing to drive around as a taxi driver for a month, but don't touch his hair.
Yeah. Oh my god. I wonder what that was. Maybe that was the Bertolucci movie.
It could have been. It could have been 1900. Yeah. It could have been. And what about Dune then? What about, because Dune was, I keep saying that I have this unique relationship with all these movies, but Dune again was another. It was my Lord of the Rings when I was a kid. I read that book. I read all of those books until Chapter House Dune, or God Emperor Doom, whichever one. Yeah, quite a lot of them anyway.
So you can tell me. I mean, I haven't. So how closely does it resemble the book? Is it sort of, has he carved it up? Has it, is it actually a fairly good rendition of it? Is it sort of?
Yeah, I would say, weirdly, the David Lynch version is extremely close to the book. All the voiceover that David Lynch uses is how the book operates, because everybody's thinking and they're telepathic and they're reading each other's thoughts through various sort of methods and whatnot. So those internal monologues being presented like in the David Lynch movie are really close. The problem with the David Lynch movie is it gets to like the 2/3 mark and it just goes, skip to the end. And, and then they fell in love, and then something else happened, and his power grew. And with this one, I think it's it's pretty close to the book, and it definitely gets the atmosphere of the book. The one time it really departs is basically towards the end, when it sort of goes in search of an ending, because the book isn't it isn't 2 books, it's 1 book, and it doesn't have a natural ending in the middle. And I think they chose a fairly good point. I liked the idea that he's the first person he's killed, and that has a sort of narrative, that he's passed. And it's kind of quite interesting that such a big film has such a smallish, but makes it big, makes that personal moment really big. He's become a killer. So I thought that was great. But the bit immediately preceding that, where they go around looking for a copter and there's Duncan, Idaho, all of that stuff was pretty much, I think, was pretty much invented and was.
I figured that
was put in as an action scene because they needed something big to go out on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I was kind of braced for the ending, because I was a minor complainant out of Empire Strikes Back for that reason. I was like, but hang on, it hasn't wrapped up. and but of course, I've learned to love that film. But with this, I was prepped that the ending was a bit like that, and I was braced for it, and therefore I found that the atmospherics were such that I didn't mind. I felt that it had built up sufficient sort of head of steam. I mean, it's all pressure and atmospherics, that movie, isn't it? Like, it's sort of like the sound in your chest, the way you feel it in your chest. It's like a physical, sensation. There were times when I felt a little bit like I was just being shown a whole bunch of extraordinary sights, but that the action or drama wasn't necessarily being advanced. I remember there's sort of good series of sequences where you just feel this massive happening, and it's the sound lifts you out of your seat. And at the end of it, you sort of think to yourself, well, what's just happened? It's like, oh, well, they just landed. That's like a one-line in script. They land the ship, but it's sort of taken minutes, and it's, your eardrums, and and so there was less sense that I got. I kept on thinking about what makes action memorable, and I was thinking about like how in Star Wars, when Han just sort of tosses the blaster to Luke, and Luke just catches it and starts blasting, and for some reason I really remember that, because it was just sort of like so great. It was so functional. It was none of this, oh, here's how this works. It was just like, catch this and start, and then bam, he was off, and suddenly he was now operating at a slightly more heroic level. Luke had grown up a teeny bit the moment he started doing that. And I thought, well, that's what made that memorable to me. And I sort of maybe felt that some of that was a bit lacking in Dune, in the sense that I didn't sort of remember much of what they did with some of these great, fantastic machines, or, it was more that I was just invited to sort of to revel in their existence. And I did, but I can remember thinking afterwards, well, what did they do with this? So the helicopter thing is a really good example of that's where he really did, that he's mastering that thing, and that sequence is memorable for that very reason. There's a lot of kind of tech reveal in the first hour that's just kind of like, it's magnificent, but it's just kind of like, well, what is it doing? But yeah, it's definitely magnificent. I sort of, I was wowed by it, and subsequently I felt a little bit wobblier about it, in the sense that I kind of felt, when I listened to people's criticisms of it, I sort of felt they had fair points, and you kind of go, no, that's true too. So there is perhaps a slight emptiness there somewhere, but it's also just such a physical movie. I do like that, and I think that his design eye is absolutely fabulous. Like the thinking, the sort of visual thinking that kind of went into what this movie is going to look like, and what these devices are going to, what these machines are going to look like. It was all just fabulous and very Villeneuve, like very, it's very him, but that kind of sanded down, kind of ergonomic, kind of, it reminded me a little bit of Apple, no knobs, no dials, no LEDs, the opposite of a film like Alien, where you're just like crammed with tech. Everything was smooth, it was like kind of this sort of almost eco-friendly Body Shop meets Apple meets, the look of it was fantastic.
Yeah, like IKEA or something as
IKEA,
well.
so IKEA sci-fi, so it was definitely like that. There was something very kind of modern about the way his love of sort of textures. I really felt, I knew how things felt like to touch, what the surfaces of that movie. I mean, a lot of it's sand, and but it's like it's like he's a really good, he's got a very sensate kind of movie sense. Like he's like, I mean Nolan's a bit like that too. Nolan's always kind of saying, well, it's not the way something looks, it's the way it feels. And he's big on textures in those movies, and textures are always telling the characters like kind of where they are and what they're, like Memento, it's all kind of what he immediately feels, like that's how he orients himself. And like, that's sort of us, that's sort of the moviegoer, and that's, what those, he and Nolan, Villeneuve and Nolan, have both kind of realized, how do you orient somebody in this huge spectacle? It's like, okay, well, what does it feel like? Like what's the, is there sand? Is it wet? What is it? So there's that's very, that's what they mean by immersive, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, his movies have a real heft to them, don't they? They have a real, I think when it comes to science fiction, it's one of those genres which is the most difficult to be really imaginative and original, because that's what everybody is doing. So, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek looks a bit like Star Wars, and Star Wars looks a bit like Star Wars now, and Cameron is quite distinctive, and Ridley Scott can be quite distinctive. Everyone else is looking like them. Everyone else is a sort of cheap version of them. And with Villeneuve, he looks like something else. He doesn't look like anyone else. It doesn't look like Ridley Scott. It doesn't look like...
Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes. So you never miss a play or lose your seat on the couch or have to go head-to-head for the last chicken wing. Shop Game Day Faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Star Wars. It couldn't possibly be mistaken for, this is just a cheap version of that,
And it's very good because he's not because there's something, obviously he's got this kind of maximalist sort of sensibility because he wants to make these big movies, but he's also got this sort of minimalist sensibility in the sense that he doesn't like clutter. And so as big as the sights and the sounds are, I find there's definite visual pleasure in the sort of empty planes that fill the screen. So again, the no dials, no knobs, the sand dunes, the just the lack of clutter. So the sense of massiveness, but uncluttered massiveness, and it's sort of that for some reason is very satisfying. Possibly because screens have just got so full up with stuff, like expensive stuff to look at, and here he's giving you this massive sort of monolithic kind of site, but it's sort of simple and it's pared down and it's somehow minimal. I would be very keen to know what his bathroom looks like. I kind of like.
I'm not going to Google that.
I kind of feel like it would just be like state of the art. Like you voice operated. You would walk in and it will almost be like an empty cube, and you'd be like, toilet, and then the toilet would emerge, and then, or basin, and then suddenly water would come. I don't know what it would be like, but it would all be very minimal, and it would be very smooth, and it would be very expensive, and it would, so that's how I kind of think of those films a little bit, like kind of he's definitely got a sensibility, and there's some kind of, I'm so interested in there must be some politics behind it, in the sense of he's obviously very green. I don't know. I'm not really I haven't really read interviews, but he seems like he should be from those films. There's something very environmental about them. I sort of think that's good. This man has to be kind of switched on to his environment, and but this is all just guesswork.
I'm just thinking, I wonder if his bathroom looks like Jared Leto's sort of layer in Blade Runner 2049, sort of water effects on the wall. Hopefully not with Jared Leto there, though. That would be...
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, it's kind of golden lozenges of light kind of falling, as shot by kind of Deakins. And that's very true. It's Blade Runner 2 is full of those environments, and also just very, very you're a bit like you're being inside a sort of temple or something, aren't they? They're very they're sort of backward looking. I mean, they sort of feel old. You don't know whether they're in the future or in the past. They're sort of, which is kind of definitely, that's something that's interesting in science fiction, is to have it be not, because that's the problem, the things that are futuristic, and that's the thing that everybody has to kind of somehow get around, is like, how do you do a vision of the future that isn't sort of Buck Rogers in the 21st century? Star Wars did it with everything being kind of busted up and junk, which is great. A fantastic idea. Like, in a way, like the best, movie it's like, idea that sort of sci-fi movie has had about how to do it. And then since it's all sort of been variations on that to some degree. The Ridley Scott ones are sort of, that tech is kind of nice and lived in. And then you get to sort of Villeneuve and it's just sort of feels ancient. But I mean by that, like the civilization, it feels like it could be like civilization could be ancient.
It's kind of medieval, isn't it? They're all barons and they're all the Lanzarat and they're all these. I mean, there was a bit at the very beginning where the sort of the thing of the ambassador comes down the sort of ramp of his ship, and it's carpeted, and it's just like, wow, you've got a carpet in your spaceship.
Oh my god, I didn't see that. That's interesting.
They're using wax seals and stuff, and I think that goes with that tactile. This is a world where people still melt stuff, and
that's true.
They still write to each other. There's not many screens in this,
That's right. Yeah, there you go. That's definitely. Is it set in the future? It is, isn't it?
It's massively in the future. It's like 100,000 years in the future, sort of thing.
Yeah, so things have kind of gone through sort of several cycles.
But even the fact that the MacGuffin is like spice, it's like they're going after salt as a commodity, or it's
And the other thing that evoked for me was, I mean, a lot of kind of things do is just sort of some of the sort of the look of fascism. There was a lot of kind of Leni Riefenstahl in some of those arrivals. That the armies in perfect uniform lines stretching to kind of infinity and whatnot. And of course, that's, I think, very conscious. He's depicting a kind of genocide, isn't he? And he's evoking the fascists, the German fascists. So it's like, so that was definitely that was an interesting kind of design element of it. But yeah, he's definitely got an eye, and he's definitely got something new to say. His eye is new, so to speak. So yeah, you do want him to make I want him to make something small again, though, because there is that slight danger now that like he's made the slight suspicion that this movie doesn't quite dispel that I had from Blade Runner 2049 was that the sort of cinematography was kind of, it was almost directing the movie, and that there was sort of, it was a sequence of fantastic, just cinematographic coups, like just these amazing environments and that are revealed to us, and that the actual thing stringing us along, was actually pretty meager, but these fantastic set pieces. So different kind of set piece from the Marvel films in the sense that they're much more like these sort of church-like environments where you just enter and experience them, but nonetheless a kind of a set piece sort of syndrome. And you want him to kind of definitely not let that get the better of him. I mean, it felt like it almost was with Blade Runner. There was a sort of something a little bit empty rattling around in the center of that film.
Oh yeah, I totally. I think Blade Runner is a film that I loved when I first saw it, and it took me a couple of viewings to realize how bored I was while I was watching it. That it was there's a real boredom aspect because he just can't. He has no economy when it comes to story, and there's no sense of like, look, you don't need to see him get out the car, go down the corridor, go up the lift, knock on his door, go through the door. You can skip a bit there. You can just go, you can just go a little bit further. And I think with Dune, I think it worked better with Dune because there was more of an epic scale. So the pageantry and all the rest of it is part of the story. But I do think he is a director who can't, or at least I was going to say he's not really interested in set pieces. I mean, there aren't any.
Not action, no.
Yeah, there aren't any real scenes in the film. I mean, the most compelling scene that I think back to is the one with the John Gabart needle and the box of pain. Is a really stunning scene, and it's very simple. Whereas the invasion, where everything gets blown up, and Josh, what's he called, Brolin, is running and commanding a thing. That there's no, if Peter Jackson was doing that, that would have been a 5-minute battle that
Sure.
that would have had a mini narrative within itself. Whereas in Dune, it was more or less like it sounds like I'm being too negative. I say it's more fancy wallpaper, but it's not. It's definitely not telling a mini story there. It's not interesting narrative potential.
That's interesting. I mean, I think you've definitely hit on something there, like in the sense of like his conflict isn't necessarily the thing driving him, whereas it is someone like kind of Jackson or Cameron. They're very fascinated by how you win, how battles are won, tactics. And I don't feel that with Villeneuve. It's sort of immensity is definitely interesting, and like kind of you saying, the Baron arriving. I was like, how many of scenes in the movie are about arrivals? I mean, there's the movie Arrival he made, but like things arriving, like it's almost like that's the thing he most enjoys: entry into something. Like entrance ways and portals and arrivals, and that's his thing. It's sort of like there's something almost ambient about it. Like his basic movie his platonic movie would just be somebody passing from one vessel to the next. It would be like that's in a sense of sort of escalation and arrive and transcendence. He's got that's the word. There's something a bit transcendent about him, and I'm not sure that it's great in the terms of making kind of satisfying action or getting us on the seat of the edges of our seat, in terms of suspense. Will Indy get under the descending rock door in time? That kind of stuff doesn't excite him too much.
I don't know how that will be solved in the second part as well, because the second part, the book was very, very influenced by Lawrence of Arabia, and the second part has a similar sort of trajectory it's about a person sacrificing their humanity in order to become a leader, in the same way, and becoming distant and kind of untouchable. I wonder, and kind of victorious. Okay, it's kind of a triumphal march. It's not like it's the obstacles in his way. It's full of bits of people. Who is this boy? Oh no, he's beaten us. It's full of those moments. Well, you'll know it from the David Lynch version, I guess.
Yeah, it's like I think I'm expecting the second part to be a little bit more narratively satisfying. There was definitely a sense of sort of setting his balls in motion for this one, and introducing us to everybody. But the story was just getting started, really, I guess, in narrative terms. They're on the run. That's how, that's sort of just a lot of time to get there. Yeah, because it's about, as you say, like kind of him out of his environment and into the desert environment, and that his exploration in that world is kind of the story. Essentially, we've just got there. So, but yeah, I don't begrudge him kind of cutting it up into two. It's sort of I was certainly kind of hooked enough to sort of think, I'm going to look forward to the next one. And I was just glad again that it was a success, although I was frightened for it. I guess a lot of people were just going, this is on HBO Max, but I'm still going to go see it, which is kind of cool. They're sort of saying, how can I get the most out of this, and buying theatre tickets.
Do you think there was ever a real possibility that they wouldn't? I got the feeling that they were downplaying. They weren't announcing it because they didn't want to publicize that it was actually half a film.
Mm-hmm. You mean you're downplaying
if they had announced before the film was released, if they had said, and we've green-lighted the second film, people would go, well, why have you done that? Well, because it's only part one. And so even the title part one comes up on the screen and isn't included in any of the sort of publicity material. It's not on the poster. It's not. So it feels like, and it also feels like this film would, imagine if they said, right, sorry, didn't make enough money, we're not doing a second one. This film would just be an absolute
But I think that, I mean, I could be, listen, what do I know? But I think that was a possibility, of course.
Right.
I mean, like nothing is guaranteed, and nobody's going to force them to make something if they think they're not going to make any money. So to my mind, no matter how much he sort of said part one and part two coming soon, folks, like it really wouldn't have mattered if it hadn't made enough money, they would have just cut him loose like they did with, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which I think is marvelous film, the Fincher version, and that was it.
The Golden Compass is another one where it's definitely, this is just the beginning. Nope, that's all you've got.
That's funny. Yeah, no, it's so I think, so yeah, maybe they had given him some guarantee. I mean, certainly in the sort of fuzzy environment in which we find ourselves, it's the communication between Warner Brothers and the filmmaker is possibly a little different. Maybe the expectations are a little different. Maybe there was some assurance of, this doesn't have to go out of the park, but it does have to do this. We're aware that we're releasing this on HBO as well. Therefore, we're not going to expect that. Who knows? But it's sort of. But yeah, I'm certainly pleased as an audience goer. Just at least he gets to do another one. I mean, he's just too good. He's a very interesting director, I think. I want to go back and see Arrival. I just have such good memories of that film, and it's kind of got better in my, afterwards. That kind of, sometimes films don't, and sometimes they stay with you, and sometimes they don't. But that one is kind of, it's definitely calling me back again.
Yeah, I think it's got everything, that film. It's got the music, the story. The original Ted Chiang story is great, but the film is a real improvement on it. It really brings out something else. So yeah, no, yeah. I it holds up. I've seen it multiple times, and it definitely holds up. What are you looking forward to? Anything that's sort of on the horizon? Any big films that are coming that you're keyed up for? I saw the trailer for West Side Story the other day, and I thought, oh, it's got a very High School Musical vibe. I'm not even sure what a good version, what the good version would look like,
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of kind of, I mean, Spielberg is such a, he's like kind of John Updike. He's like so endlessly facile. His skills and filmmaking skills are so great that he can sometimes sort of do films that are like, it's just the equivalent of riding a unicycle just to show you can do it. Like, it will be an amazingly made film, but the question of whether it needs to exist or we're calling for it to exist, whether it has an urgent reason for being is another thing, or is it just sort of something for Spielberg to kind of do, and a good, an interesting kind of way to use his time and talents. But otherwise, was this thing, was it crying out to be made? I don't know. That's the question I have over it a little bit, like kind of why. I'm sure it's going to be dazzling in so many regards. I mean, he's in an interesting period. I mean, the things that bode well for it are that he's very. I've liked all the movies that he's set in the 50s that he's done. I mean, this is different; it's a musical, but he's revisiting a kind of period that has given us also Bridge of Spies, which I saw again the other day, and I was like, why didn't this film win Best Picture again? Like, it was so good. I mean, it's so satisfying. Just amazing film, script. Coen brothers bringing a little bit of satirical bite, performances, magnificent.
Yeah.
I mean, direction, and just an amazingly satisfying film. I can't remember what won that year, but of course it doesn't hit any. It doesn't tell the Academy it doesn't show them the future, like it doesn't sort of say, this is how we're living now. This is the state of the nation. This isn't kind of where we are. It can't be dressed up as sort of something new under the sun, so to speak. But
what did you think of The Post as one of his more recent?
Oh yeah, again, yeah, loved that, and just immensely satisfied. I mean, I think they'll look back on him sort of making these films and just think, God, he was really kind of putting out some really excellent. I mean, I felt, again, everything came together: the performances, the story, the script. I mean, and just very tight as well, like not over long. I don't know what the running time of that is. It didn't feel to me like over an hour and 50 minutes, just like Bridge of Spies. I think is pretty, like, it's about the same. I mean, that's an amazing. He's very economical, and so yeah, I'm just trying to think. I mean, what else is out there? What's coming with this? I mean, I've been sort of looking at.
There are things. The new Matrix film is
oh yeah,
something I keep seeing a trailer for, and
yeah,
a little bit like West Side Story. It's like, oh, okay, all right, are we going back there?
Yeah,
I only just saw Bound for the very first time 2 nights ago, and God, that's a great movie. That's
yeah,
neat little neo noir,
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, with the Matrix thing, it could be anything really. I mean, I sort of the second two were, I think, so disappointing that there's a sort of there's a slight weariness about this, and can it escape the fate of those? Because the basic premise is so permissive. It's so lax. It encourages such laziness. That you're kind of, can they put the genie back in the bottle again? Can they kind of summon discipline from that idea? I don't know. You hope so. And certainly there's going to be a good hour, the first hour of re-exploring that world with these characters now older, and that's going to be fascinating as they're called back to it. I can easily see that being a good hour of cinema, but yeah, it's sort of, there's a question mark over whether they can, it's like a kind of can they unpickle the gherkin? Like it's kind of like, can they go back to being, can it be a cucumber again? You can try.
So it doesn't help that he looks so much like John Wick in the trailer. It's like they haven't sort of thought, right, let's really distinguish him from, let's cut his hair or do something. It's like Harrison Ford turning up in Blade Runner 2049 just wearing whatever he was wearing that day,
Yeah, no, exactly. And so, there's that. I mean, the other good, Batman, I think that looks interesting. I think that's a kind of good idea that he's come up with in terms of, again, that's a kind of noir, very much seems like a kind of noir period styling, which kind of is, the 30s, 40s, I guess, but like kind of that's kind of when the character first kind of emerged, and that's a good idea. Whether he, you sort of hope it doesn't get too blown out of that, actually, because you sort of there's immediately going to be a tension between, noir was sort of never, it never sort of lent itself to sort of bloat, in the sense that it wasn't, you don't get huge sort of set pieces, and you never get a noir that lasts 3 hours. Like it's tends to be very kind of fleet and kind of economical and kind of straight to the point, and there's sort of that kind of writing, and you hope that it doesn't get kind of hijacked too much by the blockbusteritis, the sense that something needs to be bad, that if you have a set, it needs to be blown up, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I was watching Bound. I remember you saying our previous conversation, talking about the Coen brothers setting a template for how filmmakers should go in terms of their careers, and you had the idea of doing Blood Simple as your calling card movie. Seems to have been repeated by loads of filmmakers, including the Wachowski siblings. That it's almost like, I think David Putnam said something about you should make a horror movie as your first film because it'll be cheap, and you can show all your skills off. And I think noir does a similar thing.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, a plot twist is the simplest and cheapest kind of special effect in that sense. Like, it's the biggest jolt to the audience that isn't a sort of massive explosion or that costs a lot of money. So you get that. I mean, then Nolan's first film following is similar. The Usual Suspects, similar. All these people like start with these kind of crime thrillers.
Reservoir Dogs.
Reservoir Dogs. So they're very disciplined, and they're very kind of they have to really work on those things, and sort of shave the edges, sand them down, and tinker in the shed for many years getting those things to work well. Yeah, it's definitely a shame. I was thinking it's very there's such a thing as like there's nothing like first films, because when a filmmaker is a nobody, and they are setting out to kind of be somebody and to charm us and to entice us, but like there's something about the massive like effort that they put into those things that's to charm and to entertain and to sort of that gets lost once they feel they have us. It's a bit like a relationship where the person is they seduce, and then about 3-6 months in, they just begin to get bored with the relationship. And I kind of feel like that. I feel like that with like filmmakers sometimes, that once they have us, something magic goes out. Something goes out of it for them. They don't. They like if you ask Tarantino to make his name, like none of the movies that Tarantino has made recently, although I did like the last one, but the other ones could have made his name for him. Right. As calling card movies, they simply wouldn't work. And so that's very, that's so disappointing in a way. Like kind of, Reservoir Dogs is so economical, and it's so seductive, and but as I say, I feel like now he's got me, and we're both, there's a certain amount of kind of boredom and on both our parts, and do we still want to go through with this, and should we talk about breaking up? It's like a kind of like those conversations, sometimes they can feel a bit like that, and it's sort of but yeah, the first movie test, I often think like, would this celebrated filmmaker, if they then gave me this film as their first film, would it have started the career? Would it have jump-started the career that I know they've just had? And very few of those films pass that test. Like there's a certain kind of laxity kind of sets in.
Would the French Dispatch launched Wes Anderson?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, like they're the discipline. I mean, he's such an interesting case. I mean, he's like kind of, I think of him as a bit like Malick, in the sense that like they're just making like one movie, and we get like new installments of the movie every year or so. Here it is, and now it's got Colin Farrell in it. The next time you see it, it's going to have someone else. Like that. Yeah. That's how it feels, and like kind of he's very exactly what they're going to be, and they're kind of, there's a slight sense to kind of overlook. He has kept the standard up. I mean, they're very beautiful things. But I find myself getting bored by them, and I kind of look forward almost to the time when I can rediscover them and kind of go, oh, aren't they great? Rather than see them afresh. I kind of find I like them better when they're in the rearview mirror, and I can look back on this nice row of kind of films and feel how satisfying they are. But there's always that slight disappointment that they're not Rushmore, which I do still think of as being just so unusual. It's just got that first movie charm, that kind of like, I'm going to set out to get you. I'm going to set out to seduce you, not welcome to my world, which you know very well.
There's a sort of defensiveness, isn't there? I think if as soon as a filmmaker set out their stall, it's sort of like, you take me or leave me. Know what I'm like.
I know, and from the other point of view, I can see how frustrating it must be for them to have people turn on them, because to their mind, they're doing exactly the same thing they did last year. Like,
you used to find it funny when I joked about lobsters,
definitely I felt that with sort of someone like David Lynch, where you just saw people kind of get him and then get tired of him, but the guy is sort of in his own headspace, and has always been and always will be, and you feel like very little changed for him. But the outside world suddenly decided that all the things that they had loved, they now didn't like, and how bizarre that must be from their point of view. Like they're still the same person. They're just doing what they always did. But now, no, we're bored of them. So I get it from their point of view too. But it's a curious business. I mean, they risk self-consciousness, because we come along and we point out what their little tricks are and what their little trademark camera movements are, or whatever it is. and they weren't aware of this before, but now they certainly are, and we've sort of ruined them to some degree. Like, we've made them very conscious, and if they're any good, I think it's because they were largely unconscious in the way that they were making them, or as unconscious as you can be, really. And then we come along and tell them what their peccadillos are, and thereafter they can't escape that. And I think maybe we talked about this when we talked about Tenet, but Tenet definitely felt to me like he now knew where, what Nolan-esque meant, and
right.
So, and there's no escaping that knowledge, but the one thing that kind of makes filmmakers grateful again is like a big flop. And I think I don't think that film was, but that's the one thing that can kind of get that, all the energy that they put into seducing us with that first movie. That's the one thing that can do that. Like, just, it happened. I think Scorsese failed enough to then want to get hungry again, and Spielberg failed once or twice, and it kind of made him disciplined. And they all, I love those movies, those kind of comeback movies where they screwed up, and then they kind of like they tighten the hatches and tighten the bolts, and they make Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's no greater moment. There's some, they've learned, they've listened to what the audience had to say, and they've responded. So then the relationship goes on.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Okay, I love you again.
we get that sort of get back together sex.
That's right. I mean, that's very true. I mean, I definitely have felt that with Spielberg, I think particularly, like I've fallen back in love with him many more than any other filmmaker. I think. I mean, it's strange to say that he's underrated. I mean, he is, but he's kind of kept it. He's kept reinventing himself, and he's sort of kept himself hungry. And he seems sort of, like he still wants to kind of connect with audiences. That brings discipline.
I think he is underrated the same way sort of green grass and fresh air is underrated, in that you just take it for granted. It's just there, and it's like you don't know how wonderful it is, and until I was talking to Julie Salomon, the Devil's Candy author. She said everybody thinks it's easy to be Spielberg, but there's only Spielberg's managed to do it. It's not there aren't that many directors who you can say are Spielberg, except for Spielberg.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he kind of like, he ticks every box, and he also, I think because he's sort of got that kind of naturally, he's an entertainer, he's humorous, he's got a great sense of humor, like he knows how to make these things sort of slip down. It's very easy to kind of overlook that. But yeah, his I think kind of people will kind of look, it's one of those things that once they've they'll look back, I think, and kind of realize, I mean, how many movies has he done now? God, I was astounded to find that Clint Eastwood had made like 83 films, not all as director, obviously, but like 83. I was looking because I just saw Cry Macho, and I was like, God, that 83. I mean, that's just an extraordinary. Is that even physically possible?
You're going to a sort of old studio system sort of numbers there. Michael Curtiz sort of.
Yeah, that's right. You don't really get those numbers now, because very few. Directors are much sort of. It's so much harder, really, to make movies to get the funding together than it ever used to be. I believe that's true, and like people think very carefully, and so you have these careers that have these stretches where they don't make a film, and it just seems to me it boggles my mind, the idea that like Fincher had a few years where he had time to do a Netflix series, and partly because funding for movies didn't come together. It's just astonishing to me. Like, I find it shocking.
One last blockbuster I wanted to, and then I'll let you go because you've been really generous with your time, Tom. So I really appreciate it. But one last talking about directors who have been sort of churning out films, especially in recent years. Ridley Scott, The Last Duel. Did you get an opportunity to see that?
Yes. Yeah.
What was your take?
And I felt the some of it was absolutely wildly entertaining. Ben Affleck is literally like bolts of laughter like from people, like at different points, too. Like, I've seen that with Farrelly Brothers movies a little bit, where like, you're not all reacting as one, but like suddenly you're aware that person over there found that really funny, and then this person over there. So we were all laughing at slightly different things, but all finding him amazingly entertaining. And I loved him in that. I really did. I did feel like, at the risk of sort of spoilers, that the three stories weren't quite different enough. That that I kind of wanted there to be more revelation, in the sense of, this tells a different. Her story needed to kind of tell me stuff I didn't know, and that there was so that sense there was sort of overlap, and I couldn't understand some of the retreads, and I mentally I was fast forwarding through certain sections for that reason, but that said, I like Matt Damon's performance too. I thought he was terrific. I loved his willingness to play this kind of increasingly ugly man. So yeah, it's sort of, I think, I mean, it's curious. So what did you think? I mean, you rated the last, if I remember rightly, you rated it highly, didn't you? You were yeah.
I went big on it. I was very impressed by the fact that this is like a Ridley Scott historical piece, and so you're expecting the first third. You're expecting the Matt Damon story, because there's lots of battles, there's lots of bloodshed, there's lots of heroism, there's a stoic masculinity that's not very good around women, but that's part of his charm. And even the filmmaking is very sort of very conventional. And then when it comes to the second bit, suddenly the filmmaking is a bit more fluid. It's funny, it's sexier, and it just felt like, how old is Ridley Scott that he's able to actually sort of be pastiching himself and undercutting himself? And then when you got to the final piece, it felt like it was something totally different. And I get what you mean by, it's not Rashomon. There's not a no. He puts his thumb on the scale of justice and says, "Look, this is the one. This is the truth here."
Yeah, he does with the subtitle.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even if he didn't do that, I think narratively it's obvious.
Yeah, it's
use your horses for ploughing, man. Don't.
Yeah.
I think there is a thesis to be written on Ridley Scott and agriculture, because he seems to, in the Kingdom of Heaven as well, he sorts out irrigation for the Arabs and works out how to, how to run a farm. The good year, it's got like, there's a bit of a secret farmer in Ridley that he wants to.
That's interesting. Yeah, he's very good. I mean, yeah, I love too the middle section. I think that is the sort of the Affleck, where we see the most of Affleck, isn't it? We get the inside of that court, and we get the orgies,
and that's a section he wrote as well.
Who did?
Affleck wrote it.
Oh, did he?
Because Matt Damon wrote the first section, Affleck wrote the second, and
really?
Nicole wrote the third.
Oh, I knew that she had done the third one. I didn't know that the two had divided up the second and the first like that. Yeah, I mean, I definitely had like kind of all sorts of fears going in, thinking like Damon and Affleck together in this period movie, aren't they going to wreck it to a degree, because their own chemistry is so. I mean, it's the problem of all American actors is that
I kept expecting Jimmy Kimmel to turn up at some point.
They slip into period with difficulty, and Adam Driver's one of the few that really you can put him anywhere, and he totally takes root. And so there's the Boston aspect, and I was like, how is that going to work? But the thing that Affleck realized is the same thing he did with Shakespeare in Love, which is like, I stick out a bit like a sore thumb, but that's exactly the advantage I'm going to play. That's exactly the card I'm going to play. This guy is going to be too big. He's for the screen. I'm just going to be a pompous ass, and that was utterly thrilling. And it revealed, I felt that in those sections in the bedroom and in the dining room where they're all kind of getting drunk, I actually felt like it was managing to get into period in a way that I hadn't experienced with other sort of period movies, where it always remains a little bit distant. Their mores, their sort of their ethics, their sort of feelings always regard, and so they tend to be very good at like on the battle set pieces, but really privately, what are they like? We never really know. Braveheart, like what's going on, like when they're having dinner, who knows, who cares, like it's in the bedroom, who knows, who cares. But with this, I sort of felt like there was an intimacy, like, oh, I know exactly who these people are, and he seems to too, and it's very unusual. I haven't seen it before, and I believe it, like it was like a, and you sort of think there is a very strong sort of satire on the court in there that's very it's very, the morality of it is very, his feel for the kind of the corruptness of it and the sensuality of it is really something. Like it's very there's something, the only person that's popping into my head a little bit is Fellini, because he kind of is doing similar things, but so they're not very similar at all in other regards. But in that regard, that sort of sense of like kind of really sort of sinfulness that you actually kind of enjoy and regret at the same time, and it's almost too obscenely entertaining, and you feel almost grimy for finding him so funny, and like that is very, that's quite something. And that's so interesting that he wrote that, because Ridley Scott and they clearly had a meeting of minds, and there was some kind of chemistry went on there. But that's the sort of thing that you always want to get Oscar nominated. It never stands a chance really, but like Affleck should get an Oscar nominated for that. It's like, it's just, I haven't had as much fun from a performance in all year. Like I don't think I will have more fun in a movie theater than when I was laughing at Ben Affleck in another film. Like it was just enormously entertaining.
And the last 15 minutes, the duel, the last.
Oh my God,
is just unbelievably good. I mean, it's just and even there you have Affleck as just. He sells the pathos of like he's just in his best friend,
Oh my God, I mean, I can't. The memory of that final death is just with me, like the brutality of it all. I mean, my God, I don't want to say any more really, but it's like it was, he definitely he understand, like he definitely. The thing about those films, I love the sound. I love the way everything feels so heavy. The armor feels so heavy, and the horses, and those swords just seem like they were taking such an effort to lift. Like that sort of stuff. Where I really kind of, I feel like he's the perfect director for that period, and the weather conditions. He loves snow. It's like a
snow that kind of goes up, though. I always have a niggle. It's a snow that's sort of, where's it going? I've never seen snow go up in the air. It usually falls down.
An omnidirectional snow that filmmakers do like. That's interesting. Like Nolan likes that. That snow is in the last Batman film too, when they're on the steps and they're fighting. Like it is a very cinematic kind of snow actually, because it's not. It's sort of it enlivens the sort of atmosphere.
It fills the frame in a way that's unpredictable, I guess. Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like a trudge. Like through. So that's interesting. Atmospheric conditions.
Brilliant. Okay, man. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for
totally.
I'll let you get back to your what is it? Veterans Day.
Oh yeah, Veterans Day. Exactly. Go back to actually more like kind of entertaining my daughter for the rest of the day. So we'll see. But thank you. It's really entertaining. It's a great conversation, and let me know when it goes up.
Yeah, I will do. I'll edit it and send you a copy beforehand. And I'd love to, I continue these conversations whenever you like, because they're great fun.
Just get some new films out and come back.
Yeah, nice one. Take care, Tom.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, that was my conversation with Tom. I think there's nothing else to say other than thank you, Elliot Atkins, for the music, which gives the podcast such a wonderful ambience. Now listen to that. I've got next door neighbours are basically taking the roof off their house and adding another one. So we've got some work sounds. I'm not sure if it'll come through on the microphone. Hopefully not, but if it does, doesn't matter. So Elliot Atkins, thanks for the music, and Ali Howard, thanks for the art, and I will thank you very much for listening. Okay, take care.
Cue the fireplace and your favorite fall movie. There's nothing better than a cozy evening at home with a glass of First Leaf wine. First Leaf is a personalized wine club that delivers right to your door. Sounds magical, right? They get to know your favorite tasting notes, which varietals you enjoy, and whether you prefer sweet or dry wines. So in every shipment, you get bottles tailored to your unique palate. Go to tryfirstleaf.com/fall to get your first 6 wines for just $44.95 with free shipping.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.